Wild rice is a sacred food to Ojibwe people. It was given to the Anishinaabe people from the Creator. They were told to migrate from the northeastern part of North America and to go where the food floats on water.
Researchers at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and tribes and intertribal organizations across the Upper Great Lakes region came together to form a collaborative project to study and protect wild rice, or Manoomin in Ojibwe and Pasing in Dakota.
It's all the project name is appropriate for how wild rice is being honored and handled. The Kawe Gidaa-naanaagadawendaamin Manoomin, which means first we must consider Manoomin. And I just think it's a really fitting name for the project and how the U of M team works with these tribal partners.
My role as a tribal biologist, I work for the Fond du Lac Band, but I'm not myself a holder of traditional knowledge. But I think of it as my responsibility to listen to what band members and elders' concerns are and what they value, and then use my training as a scientist to protect as best I can both the environment and the reservation and the ceded territories, and also the data I collect. Tribes are sovereign nations, and they have distinct worldviews and traditions. And then those are backed by rich cultural teachings that are passed down from one generation to the next. But since colonial times, they've had to defend their ways against encroachment by Western worldviews and environmental degradation. And so we have this need to protect and have control over, their own data. And that one aspect of sovereignty is recognizing that each tribe can practice what's called self-determination. That means they have the autonomy over what information they share. And then also to remember that self-determination means that there's no one size fits all approach. Each tribe can take that as they want and how it affects them. They have autonomy over the information they share. And so that's what we call data sovereignty. And then any collaborative research effort between a tribe and an outside entity, whether that's a university or a government, should support tribal sovereignty. And then kind of more around the data sovereignty, and solutions for that. It's really just learning about the best practices to protect sensitive data, work with Indigenous partners to formalize agreements like we have, MOUs and those sorts of things on data ownership and sharing. And then I've really appreciated the U of M's practice. It's better to kind of over ask rather than to under ask, and so I love that U of M researchers are constantly approaching tribal members and tribal biologists and saying, can we use this information? Are you okay with being added to this? And just being really inclusive in that. And I just think that's really valuable. And those are kind of the individual asks, but then I also think the collective forums where we all come together and can learn from each other about data sharing, that's really valuable too. And universities sometimes conduct research that Indigenous people oppose. And because the information can be used to hurt Indigenous people, either purposely, but also because of a lack of forethought or they're not realizing the inadvertent damage of the research. They're not investigating the impacts fully. And that in itself is sort of a harmful practice, not realizing that they need to look at it from all angles. And recognizing that there's this deep-rooted and multi-generational mistrust of universities within tribal communities, and that's reaffirmed every time they're ignored or disenfranchised or subject to false premises. And that researchers coming in, if they don't take the time to understand the specifics of those past harms, they can perpetuate them. And so one of the things I've really appreciated with this collaboration is that really from the outset, that collaboration to come together, to have a meeting, to listen to tribal elders, listen across reservations, across tribal communities, and just kind of hear what their experiences were and what the pain was about that. And that, I think that needs to happen before anything else.
Yeah, addressing past and present harms has been something that our project has focused on a lot, and it's really helped us build strong partnerships with tribes. In order to acknowledge past and present harms, we put the tribes first. Our project is tribally driven. Research in this case, as it should be, is in service to others. In our project, our research is in service to the tribes, recognizing that in the past, the university has not always served the tribes well or respected tribal sovereignty. One of the past and present harms that we're dealing with at the University of Minnesota is a long legacy of the university doing research with wild rice, with Manoomin, without the consent or even knowledge in many cases of the tribal communities. And this is a plant that has deep spiritual, cultural relationships. We're not able to direct other people's research within the university, but we are able to provide opportunities for the university to hear from our tribal partners, give them a platform to express their points of view and their needs. And essentially, that has helped us then to have discussions about, okay, if this is research, genetic research on wild rice, if this is research that's harmful, are there things that the university could work with you on that would support your own goals? And that's where our project comes in. So it's very clear that our tribal partners and tribes in the region would like to understand how climate change is impacting wild rice ecosystems, how culture and broader society are involved in these changes. And we at the university have the ability to bring resources to bear, bring equipment, scientific methods, et cetera, to help answer those questions. How do we manage wild rice sustainably? How do we restore it in places where it is not doing so well? Another principle that we have for building partnerships with tribes is recognizing, respecting, and valuing tribal indigenous participation, including intellectual labor. How do we do this? One of the ways we do this is literally paying people for their time. Like, we are all paid as university employees, as grad students, et cetera, paid to work on this project. We make sure that our grants have funding in them, our proposals, and they have gotten funded, has funds for the tribes themselves, again, to meet their goals. And that's a really important way to respect that tribal labor. Also respect the intellectual labor of our tribal partners by including them in the entire research process, the entire research cycle. That includes, what questions do we ask? What are techniques that we can use to answer those questions? How do we compile the information that we learn? You know, the writing papers together, having people as co-authors, meaningful co-authors. And then how do we disseminate that aside from scientific papers? That's really important. And we've seen that the science has been improved because of that partnership.
So I'm Darren Vogt, Resource Management Division Director at the 1854 Treaty Authority. And the 1854 Treaty Authority is an intertribal natural resource organization. So we're governed by the Bois Forte and Grand Portage bands. These two bands, along with the Fond du Lac band, retain treaty rights to hunt, fish, and gather in the 1854 ceded territory, which is present-day northeastern Minnesota. Some tribes have interest in the resources of ceded territories. And so if there's research projects going on in an area, tribes could obviously be interested, and especially with critical resources like wild rice. It's important to get tribes involved early in a meaningful way. Well, this project has done a great job at taking a step back and really developing relationships and trust with tribal staff. A lot of times researchers tend to want to push forward with a project and at the last minute want kind of sign-ons or buy-in from tribes. That's really not how it should work. These projects should be developed cooperatively up front, and this project's done a great job of kind of resetting and doing things a good way. And again, I think the real value has been building those relationships and that trust.
The number one thing is to listen. A lot of times, seems like people just kind of want to jump in with their ideas and what they think. But I think just the first part is just to listen to what the tribal partners have to say about what is going on with their wild rice and what they think is happening in their, like at their wild rice lakes. And because these are the people that are there day in and day out watching what's happening and following the weather patterns and all the other activity that happens in the wild rice ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that it's really, really easy for people to use a formal document as a checklist. We have the documentation. I can show you the file. I can show you that everyone signed off on it. So it's good. We're doing research the way we're supposed to, right? And but that's not what a relationship is. I think it's really, really important that in this project we've signed MOUs, because I think that act was a signal of the fact that we're taking this seriously, but it only matters. Our actions are what actually matters. And I think one way I can even kind of explain that is that we started out this project with letters of support. They weren't quite MOUs, but they were signed letters from tribal, from bands and from tribal treaty authorities saying that they wanted to work with us. And I think I, as a University of Minnesota researcher, did sort of interpret that as like, okay, we fulfilled that requirement. We fulfilled the requirement of obtaining, agreement to work together. And I think it was a real learning experience to realize that, no, that letter of support, that was a beginning. And that was definitely not just the end point of saying, okay, we've got a relationship, it's here on paper.
I guess, the thing when that I guess that I would like to say, and that I really have a lot of respect and a lot of gratitude, towards this project and what has come out of it this far. It's not just a partnership where you get, where we talk once a day or once a month. It's a lot more than that. It's brought some real deep, I guess, relationships. It, you know, um, beyond that, the professionalism, I guess you'd want to say, or academic type of relationship. It's beyond that. It's kind of become more personal. And that's the neat thing about it. Who- the way I see it, like Flambeau, our partnership with the university, with the Grand Challenge project, it's just it's built. To me, we've built a solid foundation for long-term collaboration and long-term lifetime relationships. That's kind of the neat thing about it. It just it, the project's been really involved, I guess, as far as our partnership, and some of the things that that we've encountered, or I've encountered personally, and everything from, being a part of that collaboration and sharing the joys and the sadness, of having the experience of, being able to share my grandson when he was born, and that type of stuff, and then when my dad passing last year, being a part of that, and the support that the project, the people, the partnership, that the support, you know.
I think one really important constraint on partnerships to understand and to anticipate for university faculty are institutional constraints, and those can be in the form of, say, the grant cycle of your typical grants that you receive, at a research university. They don't necessarily allow the time that's needed to build really strong relationships, to get out and meet partners on their time, on their schedules. Another institutional barrier when it comes to especially Research One universities is sort of the consideration of and the emphasis on publications as being a primary output of research and the primary sort of measure of the performance of a researcher, of a faculty member, for example, and there's so many kind of the difficult to measure undeliverables of research, like partnerships, relationships, trust, working together and collaborating on a project that isn't necessarily adequately represented in, say, the tenure review process, or the promotion process at universities. And those aspects of collaborating and relationship building are so critical to working with tribes and working with community organizations, that they really need to be recognized, and they really need to be considered as part of the criteria of what it is to be a successful researcher. One of the clear benefits of this work was that it was funded internally through a grant that acknowledged sort of relationship building as a grand challenge, and gave us the flexibility and to kind of throw out our initial proposal procedures and timelines, and really focus instead on those meaningful relationships. And so I know that was a clear benefit to us, and helped us better sort of recognize the important time and effort that is needed to get to know partners and build relationships. I think also having a very interdisciplinary and diverse group of students and faculty and researchers on the project helped us sort of share the responsibility of building partnerships, so that wasn't all on one faculty member or one project PI, that it was really sort of distributed across our group, so we could all step in and share that responsibility, share that accountability, and build those relationships kind of collectively as a team versus one individual PI who has to manage all of that.
I think another barrier was the issue of data sovereignty. We knew that any data that we produce should probably be put in a publication that is then put in a publicly accessible data repository, and we knew that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work if we wanted to honor tribal sovereignty and their control and ownership of data. And so, we worked with the university legal counsel and found that we really couldn't give up our right to publish, our right as University of Minnesota researchers. And so the best we could do was just be completely transparent about what we could put on paper. And the best that we could do was tell tribal partners our intent, which was to always be working together and deciding together what to publish and how to publish things, but just make it clear, even before taking any measurements at all, this is what we can commit to on paper. And if that's not okay with them, then let's not go there. Let's not collect that data.
The project itself is tied to a sacred plant that is important to local indigenous tribes. So I feel like that alone should have you should have people working on it with a direct connection to it, which is also why I was grateful to be allowed onto the project. And then again, with the opportunities for a lot of natives and like the disparities that we experience, not a lot of us are afforded these types of opportunities just to the REU stuff, the undergrad experience. Not a lot of natives ended up going for their undergrad, and therefore a lot of them don't end up getting these experiences. And those who do get the undergrad, are in their undergrad, don't always end up getting such an experience, opportunity for such an experience.
I chose to be part of this project because I am, for a number of reasons, I guess. I am half Ojibwe. I'm an enrolled member of the Red Lake Band of Ojibwe and also half Ho-Chunk Nation. And for me, it just means a lot at a cultural level to be able to be part of a project that takes care of wild rice. And wild rice is sacred food to Ojibwe people, and it's really important also to Dakota people and other indigenous people around the Great Lakes region who depend on wild rice for food and for ceremonies. So it just means a lot to me to be able to be part of a group that is being responsible and collaborating respectfully with tribes.
So I am a person of African American and European American descent, mixed heritage. And in the school system growing up, and even into undergrad, I feel like Black history, Black thought, Black epistemologies are just not taught. And I think growing up in a mixed household just gave me a really specific experience where I just didn't learn a lot about Black epistemology or Black culture until I started to seek it out or just recognize the ways that it was showing up in my family, but maybe wasn't, explicitly taught to me. And so I actually think through this project and just like other personal learning of mine, I'm really starting to realize how much value there is in different ways of knowing, and that those different ways of knowing can be incorporated into research, into science, and that if we respect the thought that comes from our tribal partners, respect the priorities that they put forth, what they teach us about traditional ecological knowledge, that not only shows a lot of respect and helps to deepen our relationships, that also improves the science that we're doing. And it improves our ability to be able to, put forth recommendations that really protect Manoomin in the future. So I think for me as a diverse scholar I'm kind of diving into my own understandings of Black ecology right now, that, it is a huge difference to have diverse scholars on this project. It's led to a lot of learning for me. And I think, hopefully that trickles back into the work that we're doing together as well. I am of European American ancestry, and through my education, I was taught that science, and that is like dominant Western science that I was taught in school, was what it meant to discover truth, and that Western science held power over determining what was true and what was not true, and that quantitative or positivistic methods of hypothesis testing and experimenting through Western science was really superior to all other ways of knowing. And so my learning on this project has really been to dismantle that assumption and see how that assumption is connected with settler colonialism and white supremacy, and think about what does it mean for science and scientists to be open to other ways of knowing and be able to collaborate in ways that are respectful to our tribal partners and traditional ecological knowledge. And so I'm grateful to be on this project and have this opportunity to really think about how I can be a scientist and bring the knowledge that I was taught through my disciplines in Western science to be of service to tribes, but also to be respectful and open to other ways of knowing.
I think on the researcher side, especially researchers who are trained kind of in, Western methods of scientific inquiry, there can be a discomfort sometimes of stepping away from that training and kind of looking at it from a different worldview or trying to understand that.
Maddie, I know you heard me say it before, and science, the Western science and traditional philosophy, around science, what they call, TEK, is, I don't think you can have one without the other, and that's today, I guess 10 years ago, where TEK, that traditional ecological knowledge 10, 15 years ago was way, that wasn't even, when you talked about it, a lot of people just kind of went, that type of thing, it's like, yeah, but today I see it where in a lot of my conversations that I have, with different organizations, they they're starting they're starting to they're starting to put that at the same level. And when we talk about climate change, um, you know you know people asking us, well, what do you see out on the landscape? Them type of people, biologists, from the state of Wisconsin, DNR, asking, well, what do you guys see out there when you guys are harvesting fish? What does it look like out there? So they're starting to ask us, and it's just, it's just, it's, we still got a ways to go on it, but it's just, I feel a lot better today than I did 10 years ago. I think that's part of this project, that with the partnership that we have, not just with Lac du Flambeau, but some of the other tribes. I think that's one of the things of how do we bring these two together? And I think and I think the partnership, that we have, I think we're getting there. It's just, but it's how you on, I guess, on the academic side, how do you lay that out so it makes sense, to the rest of the world? Like, oh, okay, that's how those two work together, and I think that's one of the things that's going to eventually come out of this. We're going to have that foundation. That's how it works. At the end, I think that's what's going to happen. I see it happen. I mean, there's already other universities, reaching out to tribes to do almost the same thing that we're doing. What we've been able to accomplish is what the original, what's the word I want to say? I guess, that's the basic for science. And I think over time that got separated. And what I'm talking about is we talk about that. So we talk about the spirit, of science. What are we studying? A lot of times we study. There's a lot of research and a lot of different things. Plants, animals, the whole ecosystem. There's a lot of different science and research done in that, and that's I think this project put that back in it. And that's just my my observations and my experience, so to this point, and it's just that's what it's about, is sharing those findings, being a part of that, being able to experience that together, being able to experience the overall broader picture of being on the landscape and beyond. It's leads to other things, you know, other than what we set out to research. So I mean, so we you know, this project's made an impact I don't even think we realize.